Thank you for watching this program brought to you by the Orthochat. Before we begin, please take some time to hear some information about our sponsors. Here at the Orthochat, we are proud to be an official partner of Lore Coffee Roasters, an Orthodox Christian coffee company out of Bonners Ferry, Idaho. If you visit their website at www.lorecoffeeroasters.com/theorthochat, we will receive 15% of your order. It's an Orthodox Christian coffee company that is organically sourcing a great variety of flavors. I drink it myself and I love coffee. And as a coffee connoisseur, I can tell you it's top notch. So visit their website at www.lorecoffeeroasters.com/theorthochat for 15% of your purchase to be contributed to our project. Here at the Orthochat, we are proud to be a partner of Scriptorum Press, a Christian publishing company that puts out great books about the lives of the saints, their teachings, and a variety of other Christian topics. My personal favorite in their collection is The Life of St. Dionysius the Areopagite. If you visit their website at scriptorumpress.ca and use the code ORTHOCHAT at checkout, you will receive 15% off of your order, and I encourage you all to check it out to pick up some great patristic and theological teachings, as well as hagiographies to spiritually enrich you and help support the Orthochat and another great Christian company. We here at the Orthochat are proud to be a partner of the St. Maximus Society, run by Archimandrite Maximus Waymore and his collective. They put out great videos talking about the spiritual life, theology, and a variety of other Orthodox Christian topics. If you check out the link below this video, you could find their YouTube channel, and it's currently a growing project, and I implore you all to visit their site so that you can help support them and a great cause for the Orthodox Christian Church. Here at the Orthochat, we support the special needs, differently abled, and their families. That's why we are a proud sponsor of TP Splash Guard, a urinary assistance device for those who need some help during bathroom time. All you need to do is remove the holding seal with instructions on the front, open it up, remove the adhesive to attach it to the front of the toilet, and now it's easier in the restroom. If you would like to learn more about this revolutionary device for special needs and differently abled people, visit tpsplash.com. That's tpsplash.com to learn more and inquire about making a purchase. All statements and opinions expressed by guests of this podcast are not representative of the Orthochat, its host, or its producers, and should not be associated with the podcast unless explicitly stated by the host.
You are listening to the Orthochat by Yanni Katsadas.
Kyrie Σου Χριστέ ελέησον, 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 Kyrie Σου Χριστέ ελέησον.
Greetings in Christ, brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 67 of the Orthochat. We are here today again with Father Gregory Jensen. Father, how are you?
I'm well, thank God. How are you?
Father, want to start us off with a prayer?
Sure. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O heavenly King, comforter of the Spirit of truth, who are everywhere present and filling all things, treasure of blessings and giver of life, come and dwell in us, cleanse us of every blemish, and save our souls, O good one. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Father, how have things been since we last talked?
Fine, overall. So Lent's begun and got through the first week, and mostly services and confessions. How are things for you?
You know what? Getting through Lent is exactly what it sounds like sometimes. You know, it's it's its own roller coaster, but that's kind of the point of it. You know, it's kind of a fast beyond the fast, just the spiritual energies, you know, kind of floating about during it. But you know what? It's good for you. You know, same way.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So yeah. You know, I wanted to pick up maybe a little bit on our last conversation, but also kind of start a new one.
Sure.
pertaining to some of the work you did a couple years back with converts, and as you know we're in this presence right now of this Orthodox boom interest. You know, everybody's it's Orthodoxy has become the hot topic in the United States. I want to say over maybe the past 3 years, and I'm sure back in the day you saw spurts of it yourself. Um, and I wanted to ask you what you think about the wave of youth interested in coming to the Orthodox Church.
Sure. Okay. Do you want to start there?
Yeah, I think
All
that's a
right.
good place for us to kick it off.
All right. So at Saint Cyril at Saint Sophia's Ukrainian Orthodox Seminary in New Jersey, I among other things, I teach faith development to youth ministers. And so that's kind of the way I frame the question. Um, I, I think we need to be just a little bit cautious about trying to about receiving, especially young men and women. And the reason for that is a lot of young people are in the most well. I mean, the definition of being young is that you're in the process of forming your identity, and the church can sort of either assist in that process of helping the young person um, come to better self knowledge, or it can short circuit that process. So one of the things that I'm interested in is the number of young people who are baptized as infants, might go to church every Sunday with their parents, and then they come to college and they simply uh, stop attending liturgy. They just sort of fall away from the life of the church, and I think a lot of that is because they have been given a lot of information about the church, but not necessarily a lot of information about themselves. They don't have a good sense of their own identity within the context of the church, which is very different than their experience in the family. They know who their mom and dad are, they know who their siblings are, they know pretty much their role in the family, their place in the family. But a lot of times we send people out of high school and they have no idea um, who they are as Orthodox Christians. And it's not just then the sort of the more strident ortho bros that are short circuiting the process. It happens in our parishes as well, and I think that's one of the reasons why when we see the ortho bros or that very strident form of orthodoxy online, a lot of clergy especially are enthused about it. But I mean, psychologically, I think it or sociologically, it's they're just two sides of the same coin of providing young people with a lot of objective information, but nothing subjective, nothing about themselves. It's one of the reasons why, for example, when kids go to camp, they love it as much as they do.
Right.
They have this short period of really having a sense of themselves as Orthodox Christians and member of the church, not through their association with their family, but in their own name as part of this community. So the problem becomes, and we see this with the OCF as well, is that when they leave that environment of camp or the college fellowship, they go back into a parish where maybe that question of personal identity is not particularly important.
Mm-hmm.
So and all I'm saying is I'm just using a lot of very fancy words to say what St. Anthony the Great said, if you would know God, first know yourself.
So yeah, so you think it might be a thing that might be lacking there is like a sense of self when they're entering the church and
Yeah,
more and maybe an overemphasis on, the grand picture of what orthodoxy is supposed to be and the things that
right.
come with it.
I think so. I mean, that grand picture is always much easier to communicate, and whether that grand picture is framed in terms of some aspect of the culture war or ethnic identity, it's really, I mean, psychologically, it's not really not much difference. Now that again, that's not to say that ethnic identity or cultural issues aren't important, but especially for young people, they can serve as a distraction to the work of adolescence and young adulthood, which is self, who am I? What is my vocation? Who are my friends? I with the college students, I've been talking a lot about them about the fact that their 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 social group of friends, guys with guys, women with women, um, that will largely determine who they end up dating.
What do you mean by
Um,
that?
well, when just well, let's say that I'm a 18, 19-year-old guy, and there's a girl I'm interested in asking out, and so we're sort of informal. We chat back and forth, and in the process, I get to know her friends, she gets to know my friends, and my friends are jerks.
Mm. Right.
So yeah, well, see, I say it out loud, and immediately it's like, yeah, she's not going to want to go out with me because my friends are jerks,
Right.
or she is going to out with me because my friends are jerks, and that's a different kind of problem. So um,
How do you think something like that connects to what's going on with the convert phenomenon?
I think people are looking for a group to be a part of.
Mm.
And um, I think one of the ways in which, especially adolescents or and even early in young adulthood, one of the ways that we can form our identity is by opposition. The classic example is the rebellious teenager who says to mom and dad, "You're not the boss of me." All right, well, someone gets online, priest gets online, he posts a video that says, "Hey, guess what, guys? The culture's not the boss of you," or the equivalent thereof. And so the identity is formed in opposition. What should happen, and again, I'm still, speaking from the point of view of developmental psychology, is that young high school students, young adults should engage in what I call a process of appreciative contestation. In other words, yeah, there's some things that I disagree with my parents, for example, but I do it in a manner which is fundamentally thankful for all the good things that they've given me.
Right.
So so for example, when I have young men at the moment, but not some young are that's coming as well now, thank God. One of the things I talk with the young people about is, before you become a catechumen, talk to your parents. I'm not going to keep the catechumenate from you if your parents don't approve. But let's at least begin that conversation to make sure that what you're doing, is not just rebelling against your mom and dad, because whether it's
Not
rebelling,
that that can't like apply, not that that can't manifest itself as like, a thing that should happen if like it's like a couple of Muslim parents or like evangelical parents that are like beating their kid for wanting to become Orthodox, but making sure that it's not purely for the reason of rebelling against whoever their parents are.
right?
Yeah.
And if the parents are beating their child for becoming Orthodox, that's a different kind of problem.
Yeah.
But um, you know, if the parents are really fundamentally opposed to the child becoming Orthodox, we have to think through that and pray through that very carefully, because the reality is he's going to have a longer relationship with his parents than he is me.
Yeah.
I mean that's just the reality. But again, what we don't want to do, um, is set it up so that the young person gets his identity from negating someone else, and whether that's the parents or the culture. Again, those are sort of interesting differences, but fundamentally psychologically, I think it's the same kind of problem, that we're not helping the person develop their own identity. With an adult, it's a little different, because typically they have their own sense of self, and they know a little bit more about what they want. So when they become Orthodox, it's usually precipitated by some sort of lack of a better way to put it, existential crisis. Um, and so they what they're trying to do, they have all the pieces, now they're trying to put them back together.
And
Uh, for the,
I
Go
was
ahead.
gonna say, I think maybe a good way to synthesize this is that, a good reason to become Orthodox isn't the antithesis of a person or thing, but the desire to be in union with Christ, like as
Yeah,
an alternative.
yeah, and I think when we enter into communion with Christ, we also enter into communion, a deeper communion with our family of origin, the people in our culture, because Christ has united himself to every human being by taking on our nature.
Mm.
So, in that sense, becoming Orthodox should, and to put it in cultural terms, help me to become a better American.
Yeah, I agree.
And that was Augustine's argument in the City of God. He said to the emperor, "No, Christians are better citizens, precisely because they are virtuous people." Um, yeah, so we should be better Americans because we're virtuous. We should be better children, um, because we're virtuous. So that's really what we're aiming at. So I think uniting ourselves to Christ is really the key. Um, yeah, but a lot of times that's really not how it's presented.
Yeah.
Um, we're the true church. We're standing against the libs, whatever it is. It's somehow we lose Jesus.
Christ needs to be the focal point
Yeah,
of all this beyond all that other.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and specifically the person's relationship with Jesus Christ. Um, I over the years I've thought a lot about what it means that, but the Orthodox Church, with all this history of theology and spirituality and liturgy and art, and has come to a world, a nation for whom Christianity is almost wholly reduced to Jesus loves you. And from my point of view, it's like, if God brings someone into my life who's just insistent that the most important thing is love, I probably need to reflect on what I've missed.
Yeah, I think there's something we can maybe learn from that
Yeah,
rhetoric, because so often we forget that in a time where love has been either abandoned or demented in a lot of ways.
yeah, yeah. So, but yeah.
But
Anyway,
yes,
but
yeah.
that's the quick dissertation on the converts. I think the only thing I would say is this is my second or third wave of converts to Orthodoxy. Um,
You mean this big thing that's happening like
yeah,
now?
I mean, it
Okay.
happened in the '80s with Father Peter Gilchrist of blessed memory, the Evangelical Orthodox Church, and then there was Frank Schaeffer, and now we've in the early '90s, and now we've got this new kind of thing going on. Um, and
Which I really
everybody has,
don't think has like a definitive figurehead. There's a lot of actors in like
right.
playing with the elements of this.
Yeah, and I think the difference between today and those earlier movements is that we now have social media and the internet, so it's much more diffused. Um, whatever we might have thought about those earlier movements, there were individuals who we could identify and have a conversation with, and they in Father Peter more so than Frank Schaeffer, but they also had sort of a gatekeeper function. Today, I have someone who just showed up and said, "I've learned about the Orthodox Church online. I am an Orthodox Christian, and you know, chrismate me."
That's got to be fun to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's just like, yeah, no, I'm glad. It's. I mean, it's like, I'm glad you think I'm glad we think we're cute, but no, I'm not going to marry you. I mean, let's get to know each other a little bit. I just Yeah.
Yeah, the
So
fire's there, the motivation and the passion for, Christ,
maybe.
or what some people think is Christ, is evident somewhere.
Well, it might be, but again, you can't. You want to keep an eye out for that, but I think we can't just assume that because someone says, "Hey, I like you," that the motivation is pure. And the reality is, even the best motivation is mixed. So we gotta sort of slow down that process and make sure that the person is really, sincere as opposed to just a fad, because this is America, and Americans like to change their religion.
That's a really interesting comparison. I never thought about it that way. That maybe, like you'll see a lot online.
Yeah,
These people that talk about, well, there's such a thing as coming to orthodoxy for the wrong reasons, which, like the knee-jerk reaction to that is, oh, well, how could it possibly be a bad thing that somebody wants to come to orthodoxy? But, you know, um, it's like I think what people are really trying to say when they say that is that there's people that instead of coming to the church to be in union with Christ and to, obtain paradise, there's people that want to maybe cargo cult their ideology into orthodoxy and use that as maybe like an outlet to push their to
yeah,
to push their motivations.
yeah. The Greek
And
old
there's
calendar.
situations of that on the right and the left of
Yeah, yeah,
how
no,
we understand.
yeah. Years ago I was having a visit with Archbishop Chrysostomos of Etna, the Greek old calendar bishop in Northern California. And he was a experimental psychologist, so he and I, yeah, we chatted, and it was quite lovely. But he said to me one time is that a lot of what happens is sometimes a Protestant evangelical Christian wakes up one morning and realizes the Reformation is vain, and they realize it isn't what they thought it to be, and they need to leave, but they hate Rome.
Mm.
So they become Orthodox. He said, but when they do that because they hate Rome, they end up becoming Orthodox and prosecuting the Reformation under the Byzantine flag. So um, so again, which is your point that people on either end of the political or the cultural spectrum can embrace orthodoxy as a flag, as a cover to prosecute whatever they want to about their own agenda in the culture war. And I had written on my Substack blog towards the end of last year, an essay. Basically, we all lost the culture war.
Nobody won.
No, nobody won. I mean, nobody won. Um, and So, but again, to your point, they don't come for Christ. They don't come for paradise. They come because they have a cultural agenda.
Now here's kind of the interesting question though, at least within the context of that. There's some people who had experiences or have kind of like a purview of any Protestant denomination or Catholicism, and like what you were just saying, come to Orthodoxy to kind of persecute what they might think is Rome, Luther, all these
Yeah,
things under the Byzantine flag. Um, but what is really like, the experiences of their old life that they're kind of on a revenge tour for. Do
yeah.
you think that there's a difference between that and then somebody looking at the heresies of Rome, Protestant denominations, and, coming to Orthodoxy out of the spitefulness towards those things since they think it offend, well, because I mean some of them do offend Christ. Do you think there's like a differentiation to be made there?
Uh, I think there's a theoretical distinction that could be made. In my experience, most people don't really have good theological educations,
Yeah.
and they don't have good philosophical educations. They don't have a good grounding in history. So you might intuit that this or that teaching of the Catholic Church or one of the Protestant groups is heretical, but typically it's just an intuition, and that shouldn't be dismissed, but it's not something you can build on. And I think what happens is there's sort of this almost unconscious collusion between the inquirer and the priest who, yeah, Luther's awful. And it's like, well, how much Luther has the person read? How much Luther has the priest read? Um, so it's you know these are conversations that appeal to people who have graduate educations in theology,
Yeah.
but I don't think our seminaries give a particularly good grounding in Western theological traditions,
And
and
I think to
they don't
maybe,
have to.
sorry.
I mean, that's not their job, but
I think maybe a good way to macro it is like if you're kind of, I don't think it's offensive to anybody to say like would no matter what your opinions are on denominations, the culture war, the current political paradigms, that everybody is not ready for every conversation all the time and right now included, you know?
right,
And that's okay. But
yeah,
some people take offense to that like as a thing, you know?
yeah. Look, I mean, what I tell people who come to me, because what we're talking about, people who are angry, basically. They're angry at their denomination of origin, their family of origin, and I tell them all the same thing. I'm really sorry that you were hurt. I'm really sorry you were disappointed. I understand your anger is perfectly understandable, even possibly even justified. But if you're coming to the church because you're angry at your pastor, your Protestant pastor, your Catholic priest, and you don't resolve that, if you don't come to a place of forgiveness, then what's going to happen is you're going to become Orthodox. I'm going to disappoint you, and you're going to get angry at me.
Mm,
And I got enough angry people in my life today without receiving more into the church.
yeah.
Very self-centered, I admit, but if anger is this very strange passion. It looks for an object, but I think, but I think sometimes, especially um, online personalities use that anger to attract clicks. And let's be clear about this. Some of the most popular online personalities need eyeballs looking at their videos because they've monetized their sites.
I'm guilty.
Well, yeah, yeah. And maybe someday when you have like tens of millions of views, you can come
Not
talk
looking
to
at We'll see.
yeah, we'll talk, but you know,
But there's definitely a way to abuse that. I see your point.
well, and yeah, but also online conversation. I mean, what we're doing is actually a little different. We're inviting people to eavesdrop on our conversation.
Yeah.
Um, that's a little bit different than someone who just um, gives a lecture or a presentation on online. A lot of times these are very slick. But you know, um, social media, YouTube, things like that, they really do foster a very emotionally intense, superficial style of attachment.
Seize
Um,
upon the rock, so to speak.
yeah. So I mean, the nice part is, I can collect lots of clicks without ever talking to anybody.
Yeah.
So okay.
It seems like okay, depending on anybody's opinion on this, I feel like, I don't think anybody really denies that it's like a multifaceted issue. It's like it's the format that can be and is sometimes unhealthy. It's the reason that can be and is sometimes unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's like these elements of these things. And the other part of it is like, you look at traditionally Orthodox nations, Serbs, Greeks, Russians, Ukrainians that have this culture that has been embedded in Orthodoxy. And that, I think, you could, as a psychologist, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I feel like that sort of thing helps to maybe condense opinion and personality, right? And it makes it easier for Orthodoxy to penetrate and maybe shift the individual into the kind of person that they're supposed to be as an Orthodox Christian. But here in the United States, with it in a multi-ethnic, multicultural situation, we're in a way of having to take people from different denominations, different ethnic and cultural and heritage backgrounds, and find a way to bring orthodoxy into that, not necessarily break them away from
Right.
what the good parts of what life made them as a person. But we have we're fighting like a 30 front war there, and then on top of that, we just multiplied the quantity of it by like 10 because like literally 2 years ago, everybody was like, there were like Catholic apologists and Protestant apologists, that are on the internet, social media talking about, oh well, this big influx of converts is kind of a mirage. There's not really this many people coming over. It's just a loud minority. And then the next thing you know, you have international news organizations talking about this from like objective studies. And now we're starting to realize, okay, it's not just anecdotal from parish to parish. It's very real. And I don't know if the infrastructure and administrative portions of the Orthodox Church
Yeah.
are ready for. I think Christ will help us, but it's like
Yeah.
if we were just on our own, I think we would just kind of crack under the pressure.
Yeah. First of all, I've never lived overseas for any, except for vacations and study abroad a little bit. But so I really can't speak to the psychology of those other nations and what that means for their religion. And full disclosure, my area in psychology is personality theory. So I am much better about how Freud thinks about religion than I am anything else.
Right.
But again, and I had written something on this for Religious Dispatch, which is Jonah Goldberg's newsletter. I'm not sure that we're having this that we're having this influx of converts. And the reason I say that is not out of any lack of piety or faith. It's just as a social scientist, I don't see the data. Um, it
Right.
it and yeah, and if no other reason, we don't have a sound statistical base for saying we've got lots more converts. So I'm not really sure that people are reporting anecdotally that they're seeing more people. And yes, there have been some media stories, but I've read the media stories, and they largely quote the same Orthodox individuals, and then they quote other news reports quoting these individuals. So it's kind of like a cat chasing its tail.
So,
Um,
so do you, I mean, just like, in spite of the lack of, I guess, numbers on paper, so to speak, of
yeah,
what we know about this, do you think there might be, or like, what are you thinking about this?
I'm indifferent. Um, well, I mean, I mean,
Uh, Just
because
like there's nothing to grasp onto yet,
well, there's
maybe.
nothing. Look, it depends on what kind of conversation you want to have. As a priest, I'm grateful when anyone becomes Orthodox. I'm grateful whenever anyone who fell away from the church reverts to the church. I'm grateful when people come to confession. When we start talking about an increase, we have more converts coming. There's a wave of converts coming. Now we've left um, that the world of pastoral theology, and now we're moving over into the empirical realm.
Hmm.
And if people want to have that conversation with me, I'm happy to have the conversation. However, the ethics of my profession
Right.
require that the answer I give is, well, you're making an assertion without evidence. And then I would say, as a priest, and when you make assertions like this without evidence, this is a problem because now you're appealing to um, you're now appealing to pride. You're appealing to vainglory. Because what does it matter whether one person or 1,000 people are becoming Orthodox? The gospel is the gospel. The people who are there are the people who Christ has brought. It's and underneath this is the assumption held without proof that what Christ wants for the church in America at this time is to be very, very large or to be larger. I see. I think that's a lovely thing if it happens, but I think church history suggests that ain't always the case.
Hmm.
Um, how. So again, if you want to tell me you think that God wants the church in America to grow, great, we can have that conversation. If
But at the very
not you
least,
specifically,
right?
if
Yeah.
someone makes that empirical assertion, well, then that requires data. And if the person doesn't have data, they're wasting my time.
Yeah.
As I tell the undergraduates, they're like, their words are like sprinkles on a donut. I mean, they're pretty,
Right.
but there's no substance there.
And at the very least, I think we could say there's people that think it's happening, and
Yeah.
that
Okay.
has
Great.
like a certain like elemental effect
Yeah.
on the air,
Yeah.
so to speak. But
Yeah. And you know what? I am happy. If that's what they think and that's their experience, that's great.
right.
But when they make the next step, which is the step that is often made, and if you disagree with that, somehow you're a bad Orthodox Christian. It's like, well, all right, now we've crossed over. Yeah, now you're reaching for a stick. And again, I'm a chaplain at the University of Wisconsin. It's an R1 research institution, and so many people will pick up the social sciences as a stick to thump traditional religion.
Really.
Yeah, yeah. Let's it'll happen. I mean, sometimes the rhetoric used by LGBTQ activists will point to instances of bias perpetrated by Christians.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, we have the same percentage of jerks as any other randomly selected population. But they take this information which is indisputable, and then they turn it into something else, which is
Into a weapon in a way.
to a weapon. Or not, or actually maybe let's not even use that because that's loaded. They take specific instances and they turn it into an ideology, to defend their ideology. We're Christians. We can't do that. And when I say, and I have been saying this for better than 20 some odd years, the data isn't there. We don't keep our young people. We don't keep our converts. People go, "Oh, you're just bad." It's like, well, I might be wrong, but that doesn't
So
make me that doesn't make me bad. It just means I'm wrong. But then you have to argue with me. The argument then is empirical, not moral.
so when we look, so because we're talking about like this phenomenon happening now, but you also mentioned like back in the Gilquest era, and then prior to that there were also like these kind of like
Yeah.
explosions of people interested in the faith. Would you this isn't meant to sound like loaded, I promise, but
No,
it's
no,
like
no.
but do you think those were equivalently facadish, or do you think those were maybe more real than what we know right now about what's happening now?
I think I'm trying to figure out. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say one was more or less real. I would say we had better information about what happened with the evangelical Orthodox mission
Okay.
because it was much more. Again, it was very much a for lack of a better way to put it, it happened in real life. It didn't happen online.
Sure. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
right, so and you could have. I mean, I met Father Peter Gilchrist a number of times. Lovely man, um, and I could talk to him about what happened, his experiences. Um, the same way I think with Frank Schaeffer. So
I don't know
I
about him. What's up with?
Frank Schaeffer. Oh, sorry, he's the son of Francis Schaeffer, who was a Reformed apologist.
Okay.
He and eventually, after Francis died, his son Frank became an Orthodox Christian. And it stirred people greatly because the son of this famous Reformed Protestant uh, theologian is now Orthodox. Recently we had, for example, Hank Hanegraaff, the Bible Answer Man, became Orthodox down in Southern California. These are events that lend themselves better to study and analysis because they're concrete.
More
But
so than just like Google searching like the instances of the word Orthodox getting popped up on like Instagram or something like that.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean the word Orthodox could be popping up for all sorts of reasons, many of them unwholesome.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah, but I think it internet religion, even the effect of social media on on young people, it is very much these are very much questions in flux.
hmm
Um, the big debate now in social psychology is whether or not um, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the rest, whether or not it has a negative effect on the psychological and social health of teenagers. The evidence,
isn't that a bit obvious, don't you think?
well, see, I'm a social scientist. I don't get to say that.
Oh, okay. Sorry. But yeah. I mean, like, but what I'm saying is that like I've been talking about this for a while, like my suspicion of such a thing, and like I was shocked that that these studies, this interest in that phenomenon hasn't been happening maybe like earlier back in like 2016, 2017.
Oh no, well, Jonathan Haidt has been dealing with the question at least for the last almost 10 years. Um, but and then I mean there have been a number of studies on the sort of the psychological effect of social media. Um, there are a series of papers by a sociologist on rapid onset gender dysphoria.
Due
Um,
to social media.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Basically the idea is that it spreads as a social contagion, and social media is the medium through which it spreads. Um, so there's this whole lovely world out there in the social sciences that talk about all of this kind of stuff.
Like mimetic viruses, stuff of that, like
Yeah,
elk.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So um,
Hmm.
it's just something that we have to be aware of. And the other thing to be aware of is I think in American religious history there are periods of awakening. There are happened after the Revolution, the Civil War, and then starting 20s, 1920s, we had what one scholar calls great awakenings that now we talk about as the woke movement, and people are like, oh, there's this new thing. It's like it's at least 100 years old.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And if you see the family resemblance with revivals in the 18th and 19th century, you realize America just gets swept up by these social movements that are religious or spiritual or ideological. And I think the first thing we say as Orthodox Christians is, okay, let's make sure that this isn't that,
Right.
and that means then we got to figure out how much of what we're seeing is just Americans being Americans.
Yeah.
And again, doesn't necessarily negate their coming to the church. It just you got to be careful. You have to be discerning.
We got to figure out the if, and then we can kind of figure out the why, and like both of
Yeah,
those are going to be, yeah.
yeah. In one of his conferences, St. John Cassian talks about a conversation between monastics. The debate was, what is the most important virtue? And they argue all night long. And then finally, the abbot asks the youngest monk who's been silent, so what do you think, brother? And he says, discernment, for then it tells me when to pursue love, when to forgive, when to be just, when to punish. So we have to be discerning.
There's a hyper lack of that now. Yeah, I think the lack of that might be causing any problems we might be seeing.
Yeah, well, I get it. It's fun. I mean, I don't fault people, but
Yeah,
slow down.
there's a rush in throwing word dynamite at one another, but it's like, at a certain point you gotta like actually do what
Yeah,
you're supposed to as a Christian.
yeah. So let's. But again, thank God for the people who are coming,
Sure. Yeah, big
and
time.
yeah, and my parish is finally starting to attract young people. It's been lovely the last couple of Sundays. I mean, we'll have 30 to 40 people, which because we're still pretty small, but we're easily getting half the congregation are undergraduates now,
Mm.
and a not insignificant percentage of the undergraduates are not Orthodox or not even Christian. So, it's not like I ain't part of whatever's going on. But,
Yeah.
so I'm not just, yeah, but it's okay. We can take our time. Um,
So, and the reason I asked you about what was happening with Father Peter Gilquist and what was happening earlier than that was because I know you did a little bit of research at least into the retention rates of these converts that
yeah.
were coming into the church. So what do you know about that? What were kind of your findings and maybe, like the
Um,
scope of.
okay. I use first of all, let me say there are two schools of thought about retention rates. I probably anyone who's listened this far has probably figured out that I am on the less sanguine side of that question.
Sure.
Uh, well, uh, um, social scientists are professional cynics and gossips.
I like you.
Thank
So,
you. Well, I'm fun to be around, but
right.
but who doesn't like a good cheerful cynic? But and then there are other groups that are some have a somewhat more positive view. Nobody, however, says we're doing great with convert retention.
Mm.
The in broad strokes, the question is, are we losing 25% or 50%?
Or worse in
Or
past, yeah.
it's kind of yeah. I was going to talk about balancing your checkbook, which you've probably never done.
I
But
don't I don't even know where mine is. So
okay, well, talk to an accountant. An accountant will tell you if your sums don't match by a penny, they might not match by $1,000.
listen, get with the times, boomer. We got Cash App. We got Venmo,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
But
All right.
anyway,
Whatever,
that's
man. But the what I looked at the 2007 2000 I think it's 2014 or Pew land religious U.S. religious landscape survey.
you were doing stuff in 2003 with this too, weren't you though?
Probably.
Okay,
I've been
maybe.
doing it a really long time. Um, but where it started to gain some traction was when I started working with the Pew Charitable Trust stuff. And what and forgive me if I don't mean to bore you, but I'll try to skip the technical stuff.
No, no, please be technical.
But
I think
it,
people are interested in
yeah,
this sort of
the
thing anyway.
difficulty with any sort of statistical analysis of Orthodoxy in America is that the population is very small, so it's hard to get a credible sample.
Relative small or like small, like just generally.
Just really small. We're maybe 0.5% of the U.S. adult population.
Mm.
To put it in terms that I will frequently use on campus, the percentage of adults who identify as LGBTQ plus is 5 times the size of Americans who identify as Orthodox Christians.
What's the next biggest religion, do you think?
Uh, we are just a little bit. I think we're with Buddhists, Hindu. So we're pretty tiny.
Hmm.
Um, I think there are. I think there are more. I think Jews are somewhat larger. I think the Muslim community is somewhat larger, but we are under 1% of the population. So
Okay.
so we're between a half and a 0.5, 0.6% of the U.S. population, which makes it very difficult to get a good representative sample. The reason that a sample is important is that the larger the sample, the more accurate the data. As I was thinking about our conversation, imagine if I wanted to understand Orthodoxy in America, and so I decided I was going to sit down with Elder Ephraim. He is going to tell me what a blessed memory. He's going to tell me wonderful things about Holy Orthodoxy. Probably normative for what, but theologically normative. However, empirically, wildly unrepresented.
Empirically, oh, you mean like in reference to like the
Yeah, yeah,
general
yeah.
population of okay, got you.
Yeah, how many
Yeah.
elder Ephraims are you going to go to liturgy with on Sunday?
I've only been to liturgy with one, and may his memory be eternal. That was the only one that I knew.
Well,
So
exactly. And it doesn't mean they're bad people, but they're not elder Ephraim.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean that's kind of the problem that we have with statistical research. The more individuals in the sample, the more accurate the picture. But when you're working with such small populations, it's very difficult to get a representative sample.
Is it a helpful or unhelpful benchmark where, like, say for example, you take places like Youngstown, Ohio, Tarpon Springs, Florida. I don't know of any. I don't know what the massive Ukrainian or Russian or like
Yeah.
Serbian populations are in America, if there are like any concentrated areas like that. But is it helpful to look at places like that with people that may even just call themselves Orthodox Christians and are nominally to include them inside of the sample
Well, it depends.
research? Or
It depends on what kind of information you're looking for.
yeah, true.
Um, I was asked one time by a bishop to recommend psychological testing for seminarians, and my response was, "Well, what are you looking for?" Well, whether or not they're fit to be a priest. It's like, all right, oh, I can tell you that's no clinician out there can tell you that. That's not his job.
Well,
I mean,
that's a little bit like not okay.
no.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but it's like that's not like I mean like aren't you supposed to find something out from maybe research instead of look for something, or am I missing kind of the
Well,
point?
no. I mean, you want to research a particular question.
Okay.
So, for example, Pew did a very good job in what one of the criticisms of Pew charitable stuff is that they oversampled, which means they took a small number of Orthodox Christians and then basically multiplied their data as if they had taken a larger sample.
Okay. I see the
So
problem.
yeah, well, but the other way to do it is, which is where the sort of the higher retention rate comes from, is to sample specific parishes. The difficulty with that, in my view, is that it relies on the perception of typically the parish priest.
You mean that he might not be accurately presenting the size of
Oh,
his ministry.
he's not accurately presenting it.
Oh, okay.
But no, I fill out surveys for the diocese, and I do my best guess.
What's the error what's the margin of error there? Like say for example like some priest says like 30 families or like 50 families. Like what's usually the
I don't know,
oh, I mean,
but nobody does.
okay, yeah. Because like
I,
nobody could really know if like if anybody not intentionally lying, but like it's a lot of it just might be guesswork.
Right. Yeah. And again, you know, when you say is it accurate, that's kind of a loaded question.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah. No. I don't think Father's lying, but I don't. I mean, whether it's accurate or not means that there's some standard against which I can test my data.
Mm, okay. Because
And
you can't ask every single Orthodox Christian in the United States. Like you got to
right,
kind of expand.
right, and when I say, well, I have to, I just it's just hard to know whether or not someone's left the church or just gone to another parish or moved out of the country. So the point is that kind of data it has its own that kind of research has its own value. It can fill in a lot of the details and give us some of the richness that's not in the Pew Charitable Trust survey. But what I like about the Pew Charitable Trust is that their standard is they present the number of Orthodox Christians as a percentage of the U.S. adult population. So when they tell us how many Orthodox Christians are immigrants or first generation, how many are converts, there's a constant standard that they're appealing to.
Okay.
And what I saw when I looked at the data was there was a precipitous drop in the number of people who reported that they were converts to the Orthodox Church. Um,
Between a certain time period or
between '07 and '14, in that 7 year period, it looked like roughly 50% of the people who became Orthodox uh, were gone.
that's frightening.
Well, it is, and this is why. But then I look at the data that the church offers with the retention rates of young adults baptized in infancy, and some 60% of children baptized as infants will have left the church by the time they're 25. When
Yeah.
when you look at the data a little bit more closely, you discover that um, it's something closer to 80% in the Greek Archdiocese, um, somewhere in the 60% range for the OCA and the Antiochian Archdiocese. And then the smaller jurisdictions are roughly 40-50%.
So there's a correlation with like the smaller a jurisdiction is maybe I mean a theoretical correlation with the smaller a jurisdiction is then the retention rate's a little bit better for converts and
Well,
for
I'm talking
cradles.
about retention rate of young
Yeah.
people.
Right.
It could be, or it could be sampling errors. It could be reporting errors.
Mm.
The 80% number for the Greek Archdiocese, I think is, well, I don't know. Honestly, I mean, the only thing I know is that what data we have suggests to me that a 50% defection rate of converts is not unreasonable.
Yeah, and the stuff I've been here like so prior to just glancing, I wanted to talk to it more about. Yeah, I wanted to hear it from the horses. Well, from the priest's mouth. You're not a horse,
No, no,
but and
not,
but prior
not a
to
mouth anyway. Yeah, yeah.
right, prior to prior to me look like glancing at your research and talking to you, I've been hearing this problem with, with the lack of seminarians coming in throughout the years, as well as the retention rates for cradle Greek Orthodox. I've
Yeah.
been hearing this conversation for like the past 10 years. Like
Yeah.
it got so bad to the point where I was at like, Camp Nazareth. I was hearing it at like YAL events.
Yeah.
There's priests that will include in their discussions, hey, listen, you know, only 20 to 30% of you guys will be here later on. And like everybody just had this look on their face
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh,
Well, and hey, since we're doing numbers and all my provisos about the soft nature of the data, working with the soft data, we'll lose 60% by the time they're 25, and of the 4 in 10 that are left, one will be at church on Sunday morning.
that's rough.
Well, actually we have one of the highest Sunday attendance rates in the world. I think Romania and Ukraine are higher.
What
Um,
you mean American Orthodox Christians?
yeah,
Okay.
we're between 25 and 30% attend liturgy on any given Sunday. Now, again, got to be careful because it doesn't mean that 30% come every week, but that every week 3 out of 10 are going to be at church.
Like interchangeably, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's yeah.
So
So
we also have data on the attendance rates as well.
it is, but it's soft.
Do you think there is any anything to be said about maybe a potential relationship between attendance rates and the retention, or no?
Oh, probably, yeah.
Okay.
If I mean, first of all, when we talk about attendance rates, again, that's what I like about Pew. It allowed me to look at retention rates for a number of different Christian and non-Christian traditions. Mormons, by the way, have like some of the highest retention rates and weekly attendance rates. I mean, they are whatever you think about their theology, they are faithful. But we mostly look like mainline Protestants.
Like on the numbers.
Yeah, on the numbers. Well, actually, we also look like mainline until fairly recently. Um, we also looked like mainline Protestants when it came to moral issues.
No, well,
Uh, we are generally pro-gay rights, pro-choice.
in American Orthodoxy, like
Yeah,
per which is there research on which jurisdictions maybe like are heightened within that aside from others, or is that not differentiated?
I don't think it's been broken out.
Okay.
Um, but yeah.
For,
So
sorry.
no. But actually, now we've shifted. I think more than half of Orthodox Christians in America voted for Trump in 2016. I'm not sure what the data is for the last election.
Like I mean like that so this I'm gonna use just kind of like a soft blanket term here. So like the liberal orientation of the Orthodox Church in America, it has at least in some way noticeably shifted in the
We
past years,
yeah
aside
we
from the data from before.
yeah we've generally been center left. Which I mean, you're if you're living in the Pittsburgh area, probably your grandparents or your great grandparents, if they were here and voting, probably voted Democrat because they were union folks.
My grandparents got here a little, but I know what you mean generally. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, generally they I mean, you generally new immigrants do not vote Republican.
yeah. Hmm.
Um, yeah, but we tended to be more center left. Then, but for a fairly good chunk of time, we were about evenly divided. Now we're moving more, I think, center right. But to come back to
Well, but before we go to, but excuse me if this is like an unfair question, but do you think that that orientation was more predicated by the cradle immigrant population or by the convert population? Probably the cradle
well, I mean
population.
the yeah, again, immigrants tend in America to in recent history, immigrants have frequently voted Democrat.
Hmm.
Um, you, you know, it go down to any of the mill parishes in Western Pennsylvania. You're going to be hard pressed to find a grandfather or grandmother who you know was voting Republican before Reagan, and even then,
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, it was the same with my Irish and Polish and Mexican family members. They were just Democrats. It's just what you did. They weren't WASPs
Sure.
basically.
Yeah.
But to come back, I do think, like I said, our numbers track with other traditions, and there does seem to be an argument to be made that what really matters is weekly attendance.
And that's something I wanted to ask you, like
Yeah.
mentioning the Mormon stuff before, I wanted to ask maybe about the whys concerning retention rates generally, but As far as like, you talk about the Mormons have the highest retention rate out of any
Yeah.
religious orientation here in the United States. What do you think is the thing that generally predicates high church attendance?
Well, I again, not to be reductionistic about it, but having a good sense of one's having a sense of one's personal identity as rooted and nurtured by the tradition.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I have a we have a deacon who is a therapist, and he's writing an article. He's promised to write an article that he's supposed to send me to review, but whatever.
I'll be waiting
Um,
for it. I'm interested.
yeah, I'm waiting for it too. He's going to be my next text after you. But you know, one of the other things that's important is that people have, you know, fairly high emotional IQ or emotional intelligence. In other words, they have the ability to understand social situations and know how to respond to people in a way which is helpful.
What group of people specifically?
Any group. Well, actually, he's the article he's writing is that one of the ways that you inoculate against religious extremism is by making sure people is by working with people to have good emotional intelligence.
I remember we talked about in the last episode. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that that's part of it too. I see with the undergraduates when a lot of the undergraduates who show up at OCF, they actually were attending liturgy on a fairly regular basis in high school, but they were attending liturgy with mom and dad and their siblings, and their grandparents were at church, and their aunts and uncles and cousins and godparents. You know, Orthodox parishes, whether it's convert or ethnic, tend to function as villages.
I think there's something to do with the cultural connection there, but yeah.
But even convert parishes tend to be, you know,
Okay,
they
sure.
replicate that. Yeah, but the point though is that's great for the people who are part of the village.
Right.
But you know, when you go to university or you get a job out of state or out of town, you know, you're in the situation of the the anyone who migrates from a village to the big city. Suddenly all of your social connections are gone, and so you end up relying on yourself and the connections that you make um, in your new locale. Well, you know,
Do you think that makes it harder for these individuals to associate with
oh
the out group?
yeah. Well, I think it makes it hard for them to associate with the out group. I also think makes it hard for them to come to church. Um,
Why?
well, because you've never walked into church by yourself before.
Mm. I never would have guessed that was a problem. Like I thought it might just be like, they're just slotting into a new Orthodox community. That's at least Orthodox, and I would think would be familiar to people. I
Well,
didn't, yeah.
oh, you know, it is not uncommon. Um, well, it's getting less uncommon, but when I started working in campus ministry a long time ago, it could be that I was the first convert priest that a kid met. They may never have attended liturgy that was primarily or exclusively in English.
Hmm.
Um, there are two other parishes here in town, one Greek, one Antiochian. Mine's Ukrainian. Our music does not sound like theirs.
Right.
That's a, if you grow up, even if you grow up listening to the Byzantine chant in English, you come and you hear Kievan chant and four-part harmony. You might think it's lovely, but it's not familiar.
Yeah, no, like when I hear Carpatho Russian stuff and I hear like Slavic stuff, I'm like, this is like alien to me. It doesn't necessarily make me uncomfortable, but I could see how it might make somebody feel unfamiliar in a place.
Well, yeah, and if you're 18 and your identity as an Orthodox Christian is very tightly linked, to your membership in a family or an extended ethnic community, then to not find that family or to not find that ethnic community is very difficult. and and you see, I mean, and I'm not I'll use the Greek community just because it's larger and it's
It's easy, sure. Yeah.
well, but even within the Greek community, there are gradation, there are distinctions between where in Greece the people came from,
Oh,
and
you have no idea. Oh my
oh, I
God.
do.
Oh no, well you do, but it's like, as a Colombian, when I see like people that are like from Rodos or like Botiaca or something like that, I'm like, yeah, it's like we're speaking a different language, almost literally. The dialects
Yeah,
are, yeah.
when I lived in Pittsburgh, they've now reposed, but there were a couple of Greek priests from Rhodes,
Mm-hmm.
and they thought I was great, if only because I wasn't from Chios.
Yeah, that's usually the way that pans out. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but now if you're a Chios kid and a Rhodian parish is going to, or actually my one I remember is a woman from whose family was from Sparta,
Mm-hmm.
who was not what didn't feel welcomed in a parish where people were from Athens.
Yeah, that beef is still going on like 3,000 years later.
It it surprised me when an old Greek assured me that Patriarch Bartholomew was not Greek; he was a Turk.
That's the
I,
way some of them act. Yeah.
I'm staying out of the. I mean that's the in-house thing. Point is, look, all of these things that we use to help people connect to the church are great, and they're a blessing, but they're not necessarily things which are helpful when, to your point, the church, people in the church encounter any of the hundreds of different ethnic and ideological communities and movements in the U.S.
Right.
And and I again, this is a problem. I mean, I've had this conversation with the other chaplains at the university. They say, well, what can we do to help you? And they're sincere. It's like, well, you have to understand us. Well, can you give us a quick overview? No.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, I don't I appreciate that you want to help me, but to help me you got to get to know me, and honestly, I don't think you have the time and resources,
So,
because
yeah.
this is for you a very alien religious tradition. Go ahead. Your time of
How
thought.
how do you think there's a need? Okay, obviously the answer to this is yes, but like, do you think there's a need for people to get over that and just unite in their orthodoxy? And if so, how does that happen? How do you do that?
Well, yeah, I think it would be lovely if we united in our orthodoxy. Of course, we have to prepare for redundancies. Uh, going to be I mean, so let's say here in Madison, we united to one church under the pastorate of the senior priest.
Yeah,
Oh,
like,
wait.
so putting that on the macro, it's like the American Orthodox Church that a lot of people are talking about.
Well, yeah, it's great, but I'm the pastor of the smallest parish. I'm the oldest priest.
Right.
I am the senior priest in years of service and my rank. So what do we do? Are the other two guys not pastors anymore? I mean, and that's kind of silly. But what do you do even say in Pittsburgh? You have at least two or three chancellors. So who's going to lose his job?
Right. Um,
Which bishop is going to move? Which bishops are going to move?
well, what I was maybe pointing towards more so is like, actually, no, you are kind of talking about that.
Yeah,
On like a cultural premise, it's
yeah.
like to maybe I don't really even know if there's a way to avoid that. You can't tell people to abandon who they are, but you also don't want
No.
people like dividing each other on the lines of the same religion, which is like, it's like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, sometimes people will ask me, what's the difference between like Greek and Ukrainian Orthodox? It's like, well, the faith is the same. The music is wildly different. But the things that you probably notice most would be when we celebrate Pascha, when we celebrate Easter, Greeks eat lamb, Ukrainians eat ham, sausage. Greeks say toast Christ is risen with ouzo. We use vodka. I use tequila. But so the question really becomes, can we see our different ethnic traditions as mutually enriching? In other words, is can you, not you, anyone, can we look at can a Greek look at a Romanian look at a Russian look at a Ukrainian? Well, probably not at the moment, but can we look at these different ethnic communities or cultures and see how they can mutually enrich each other?
Well, I think that kind of comes down to the question of like some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. It's like, how do you connect yourself and retain the parts of the culture that make you the best parts of who you are while
Right.
still finding your sense of self in a world where you might have to leave that and be included in something that is equally the one Holy Catholic and Orthodox Church, but also like different from everything you've ever known in a lot of
Well,
ways.
well, yeah. I mean, yeah. Um,
I don't know if there's an easy answer to that. I'm not
well,
putting you on the spot, but
oh no, I don't think there is. Oh no, I don't feel put on the spot. I'll just tell you, there's no easy answer, and it just takes a lot of time. I mean, it is one of the reasons, and but because my young friend, you are asking at least a slightly programmatic question. Let me give you a programmatic answer.
okay.
Build parishes on campuses.
I agree. That is objectively a good thing.
Build and send, especially young men who want to, who feel a call to be celibate after ordination. Send them to the military as chaplains.
Okay, so on the first one, I guess from like a systematic point of view, like have you been seeing that happen maybe more and how does that happen? Like what's your
I mean, I think my parish is on the campus of the University of Wisconsin. There's the OCA parish at State College. But we're institutionally we're very far from doing what Catholics do of building Newman centers on campus.
like where I grew
Univer-
up in like YSU, it's like we have like there's a Russian Orthodox church, there's a Greek Orthodox, but there's parishes everywhere in
right.
Youngstown, so it's like
But one of the things that I've discovered, and I've had this conversation with my Catholic colleagues, it's very difficult to get students to go off campus to attend liturgy.
really.
Yeah, that's actually why University of Wisconsin has St. Paul's Center, and it was built there because even though there were Catholic parishes, a relatively easy walking distance, students didn't go. Even mine is a 5 to 20-minute walk from camp, depending on where the student lives, and it's a hard sell.
What
Uh,
is it just a convenience issue, do you think?
part of it is, I think, is a convenience issue, but part of it is again, they're again, there are a lot of reasons why it's just hard to get to church on Sunday morning. And the only one over which we have any kind of programmatic control is geographic. I can't make a Greek kid comfortable in all night vigil in an OCA parish. It's just not something that's in his experience or her experience. But I can put a parish, hopefully, on YSU's campus. So that at least takes away one impediment.
Right.
But again, this is extraordinarily expensive and it's very labor intensive.
Do the
But
universities have a desire for this sort of thing to happen, or at least some of them?
I think we could probably locate on Catholic or Protestant affiliated colleges and universities. I think we would probably do that more easily than at a state or private non-sectarian.
Really, I honestly thought it would be the opposite because like for through I mean obviously the theological differences like they would buck back against that sort of thing as opposed to like a secular institution that maybe just wouldn't know the difference.
You know, it, it campus ministry is kind of like being a military chaplain.
Hmm.
It's like, Archbishop Daniel was a army chaplain, and we talked a little bit about it. It's like, you're just in this environment where the person you have to depend on as your colleague in ministry is not someone from your own tradition,
Right.
and you're serving this very particular population that frequently has a whole series of pastoral and emotional needs that are very different from what you learned in seminary or what you're going to experience in the parish. Um, so, but I think I've typically found reasonably good responses from Catholic and Protestant campus ministers. So I think we would do well in an environment that was already at least had some public religious identity. We would, I think it would make better sense. People don't come to the University of Wisconsin, for example, to pursue their Orthodox faith.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that they don't value their orthodoxy, but it's not the motivating factor. Someone's going to go to a religiously affiliated institution because they value being in a religious environment, and so that gives us sort of an easier um, in. There's one less impediment.
You know,
Um,
and my theory was that there was always like our biggest problem in the United States was always just like kind of an epistemological and like access problem, right? But because I'm still of the belief that if you walk down the street, 7 out of 10 people that you talk to that didn't know a Greek or whatever
yeah,
growing up wouldn't know what Orthodox Christianity is.
I,
And like it's just an exposure problem. And I think after
yeah,
my theory anyway is that if after we take care of the exposure issue and we kind of like expand into the metasphere of the American consciousness, after that we could start maybe refining why people are like coming and leaving and whatever. And it gives us kind of
yeah.
better data points, I think.
It could help. I gotta tell you though, I've been out and about in a cassock and a cross, black cassock cross. My beard was bigger those days. Um, and people will come up to me. I remember in California, it's like kid came up in a skateboard. It's like, dude, I didn't know Jews wore crosses. Okay, let's chat, young man. But I think again, programmatically, I think if we started focusing on those areas in American culture where young men and women congregate in large numbers, and especially young men and women who are, for lack of a better way to put it, goal oriented. That's university, and that's colleges and universities. That's the military.
Do you think there's something enticing about orthodoxy to maybe the university and military types or the people that pursue that sort of thing?
I think yes, I think it is actually. That Go back to data for just a second. The highest rates of religious affiliation are found in people with bachelors or at bachelor are actually with bachelors and masters. The more educated you are in America, the more likely it is that you attend church on Sunday.
Are,
The
are these studies public that we could maybe put them down in the in
I've got to look around. Yeah, I think Ryan Berg, University of Illinois, has done some. I'll try to track them down for you.
thank you.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but it's that's actually one of the reasons why the military is important, because a lot of enlisted personnel are essentially high school graduates. They're going to go on to probably blue collar jobs, and that's the population that most religions in America are simply not contact. They're just not making that connection.
That's contrary to the popular thought, by the way. Like a lot of people think the opposite's like the occurrence, where people who are more educated like end up as like atheists or something, or they fall away from religion, and then like the blue collar quote unquote Bible Belt sort of thing. Like,
Nope, exact opposite. best predictor for religious affiliation is education. Um, and think about it for a minute. Think about how we present the Orthodox Church. Now, try to imagine that presentation if you are a 30-something-year-old blue collar worker, you know, I don't know, just like working at McDonald's. I mean, again, I mean, just what are most of our, and by the way, I include myself here. You know, how, I mean, what am I going to say as a priest to someone who works at McDonald's? Pretty much
Right.
everything I've learned is I have been well trained to talk to people who are well educated.
I
Actually, let me rephrase it. I've been trained to talk to people who have been educated in a particular way.
I feel like it's all this and then maybe like a spiritual element that because I mean, I agree with everything you're saying here about like, what kind of people become religious, what kind of people stay, the reasons they stay and the reason they go. But I also feel like there's maybe a religious element or a spiritual element here
Yeah,
that, sometimes God just calls people to
yeah,
it and
yeah.
it kind of muddles up the numbers in a way.
Well, and that's and that's fine, and that's why at the end of the day, however much I like being a hardworking social scientist, I made a choice, and my choice is to be a priest,
Right.
and to be a priest in a very unchurched town and on a campus which is, very, very secular. The fact that I've read a lot and I'm smart gives me a certain kind of advantage on campus. I'm not going to deny that. But fundamentally, I gave up a whole lot of other options to be a priest.
Right.
Because I like being a priest. I think it's the way to go. And I think what we have in the Orthodox Church is in fact the gospel in its fullness. And all the other stuff I do is really just trying to figure out just the ways in which the gospel has been misunderstood and misappropriated. A couple of weeks actually on campus now, one of the evangelical groups is having a 4-week book study on the life of Saint Anthony.
That's pretty cool.
It is until you realize the title is Mining Monastic Wisdom for Modern Day Christians.
Oh, so it's literal quote mining. It's literally
It,
just like
it
insertion of that. Yeah.
well, it is it. I was asked by an evangelical pastor if I would like to come on staff to hear confessions.
I don't think he knows the bad implications of that, but
Well, yeah, but the point is though, many Americans have a very consumer mentality towards religion,
what do you
very
mean?
utilitarian. It's like it never
Take what
it
you need and go.
yeah, yeah. It's in our last conversation, I told you I was educated by Cistercians, not Orthodox monks to be sure, but I spent from 18 to 30 studying. My professors were and my confessors were all monastics,
Right.
which is how I became Orthodox. So this idea that an evangelical pastor is going to pick up the life of Saint Anthony and maybe he's gone on a retreat or two at a Benedictine monastery or he's just mining for quotes. You say it's very much a consumer orientation. I can take what I want from Saint Anthony and then leave the rest.
And
Um,
like you really the worst part is you really can't stop people from doing that aside from
no,
warning them of the danger, and you can only really hope that reading that stuff is going to bring them back to us.
yeah, but but we're fighting a culture, a religious culture, where I will have young people come and tell me, typically from one of the evangelical groups on campus. Yeah, I'm going down for spring break this year to Daytona Beach to evangelize. And I say, let's think this through for a second.
Yeah.
You're going to go up to kids who are interested in drunkenness and fornication, and you're going to tell them about Jesus, and then you're going to move on.
I wouldn't
Yeah,
even
but
say the motivation behind that is good to think about.
well, what I asked one young man is how precisely is that? What's the difference between that and just trying to pick up women in a bar? Because there is no you want to do something which is profoundly intimate and life changing with no lasting personal commitment.
Right.
How is that different from promiscuity? He was, needless to say, offended.
I
But
I see your point for sure. It's like, yeah.
yeah, it is. There's a and I can there was a book based on a dissertation at Pitt a couple of years ago, and the author pointed out that this consumer mentality affects orthodoxy all the time. People engage in internet study or book study, and then they come to these conclusions. They resolve the difference of the great schism in their own minds over the course of a few weeks of study.
Well, this is the predicator of, I think, like the debate culture that's kind of risen
Yeah,
out of, yeah.
yeah, and they come to the priest, and the priest ratifies this.
Yeah.
So the consumerism isn't just on the other side of the Bosphorus, as it were. We are prone to this as well. But here's the deal, and I know we got to go. It's kind of like marriage. Nobody gets married for the right reasons.
What do you mean?
You're young, you're in love, you have no idea what marriage is. And it's you're always and people are always surprised when they have their first fight.
Who would have thought that's gonna happen, right?
Everybody theoretically knows it's going to happen, but I always tell couples, all right, within a few minutes to 6 months after the wedding, you're just going to get depressed and disappointed because it's not what you thought it was going to be.
So,
and
like,
and that's
yeah.
okay. But it's okay. Saint Cyril of Jerusalem is very clear that the catechumens are in front of him for all sorts of reasons which are self-serving. And he says, rejoice, for this is the bait on which you have been caught on on the hook, which is Christ.
So what would you do, I guess, as maybe to transform that? Because I think kind of the implicit answer there is to turn the wrong reason into the right reason, right?
Right. And that's just a matter of spending time with people.
Hmm.
So, let's I think God has called me to work with college students.
Right.
And I have invested a lot of time and, I mean, frankly, personal resources into building a parish on a university campus. And it is frequently slow going, but that's what God wants for me. And the bishop has blessed it. Actually, the Patriarch of Constantinople blessed it as it happens. But which is why I got the spiffy cross last year. But
Congrats.
thank you. Yes, it now allows me, my patriarchal cross now allows me to buy my own coffee. I try. I mean, I'm honored. I really am. I'm an archpriest of the ecumenical throne for working with youth. I appreciate the affirmation, but the thing that it comes to is find a group of people, you know, you can for whom you can pour your life out.
Right. I agree.
Uh, and whether it's in my case college students, whether it's your spouse and your children, whether it's your parish, whether it's your ethnos, I don't really care who it is, but give yourself over in love to others, for the sake of Christ and the gospel, and your heart will be purified. because in the end, it isn't a matter of, I don't need to change your heart. I need to change my own. And and I'm part of that process is I'm going to learn how to serve the people who come to me. I am so happy. I've been on campus for almost 16 years, and this is the first time the students have told me they're dating.
There we go.
And
Father,
it
we're
is,
we're not burning the clock, are we?
no, that's fine though. But I don't want to burn the clock for you either. But to come back to it, nobody starts anything with the right motives, but our motives become right in the doing.
Right.
You know,
That makes sense.
go to any seminary when the cassocks are handed out for the first day. Honestly,
I've heard stories.
they're all Chrysostom in their imaginations, except the ones who are lowly and worms and should only eat dry bread. The point is, everybody. I mean, someday, I don't know if you intend to get married, but I hope you. If that is someday, you're going to see a girl, you're going to fall in love with her, and the reason you notice her is not why you ask her out. It's not why you're going to propose to her. It's not why you're married to her, not going to marry her. It's not why you're going to be with her 30, 40, 50 years down the road, God willing. None of these new motivations call into question the integrity or the sincerity of that first time you noticed her across the room. But each
Yeah.
builds on the other.
How do
And
you keep people on that? How do you get them to stick with that program? You know, without maybe either pushing them away or getting them, I mean, bored. Like if there was ever a better word for it.
I got to stick with it myself because the reason I started the conversation with that person is not pure. My motives were mixed. So it isn't a matter of trying to keep you on task. I got to keep myself on task.
So good priests make good Orthodox Christians. Huh. Never would have thought.
No, good Christians, good Orthodox Christians make good priests, and good human beings make good Orthodox Christians. What does St. Irenaeus say? The glory of God is man fully alive. There is no difference between a wholesome, psychologically, emotionally, socially healthy Orthodox Christian and his Jewish or Muslim or atheist counterpart. What changes is the motivation. But I recognize men and women of great personal integrity who live their whole life outside the church. And that's not to minimize the church. It's just to acknowledge that they're just like my sins are my own.
I
But
mean, those
but
things
our
are
virtues
married,
are
right?
shared. Pardon
Yeah.
me?
Well, those things are married, right? You know,
Yeah.
you could, the person who has a dedication to Christ but no virtue is just as, just as much on the way to hell as a person who has, well, I don't want to say that. That's not really
Well,
true.
well,
Um,
if I'm
you know what
dedicated,
I'm trying to say, I
I
guess.
do. Look. Uh, I have no reason to prefer my sins to yours.
Hmm.
So I don't know why I should prefer my arrogance to someone else's atheism. Why am I a better? Why am I guaranteed to go to heaven because I'm arrogant and he's going to hell because he's not a believer?
It's the same road.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it just, yeah, it's Saint. Yeah, well, I think we talked about it last time. Saint Maximus the Confessor says that on the cross, the only thing that God Jesus desires is the love of his crucifiers.
Hmm. No kidding.
But that's why he was on the cross.
Yeah,
He
that
was
was the whole
on the
point.
he's on the cross for the people who are nailing him there,
Yeah.
and the only thing he wants is to love them and to be loved by them. I am not there yet. So
Yeah.
so when I look around and see people aren't there either, what can I say except yeah, okay, they're kind of a reflection of me.
I was gonna ask some
Yeah,
more particular stuff, but
go ahead.
well, okay, but like what I was gonna say is like, I feel like really the only solution to getting people to the church and then obviously staying here is just to be Christ-like in
Yeah,
everything that that means. And then like the deficiencies within that are just us lacking, the
yeah.
portions of being Christ-like that we should be.
Yeah. See, when I look at all the data, when I look at the retention rates, when I look at all the empirically verifiable obstacles and facilitating conditions for the life of faith, at some point I got to realize that what I'm concerned about is faith in Jesus Christ. And it's good to know the ways in which typically that can be undermined or fostered, but in the end, it is all ultimately dependent upon the free response of the heart to the grace of God, to God's presence, and all the other stuff basically tells me the ways in which I can get in the way.
Amen to that.
Yeah. So be a bridge, not a wall, as a Catholic friend of mine says.
Be a bridge, not a wall. And start youth programs in your church, because that'll help a ton too.
Oh, and go to campus. Come on. Who are the young priests who actually take that back. Don't send young priests, send old priests.
Look, man, I'm working on it. I promise. I'm just.
All right. Well, when we actually what we really need is those priests, and I'll put out the challenge there. If you are a retired priest and you're bored, and you are, I know because I was talking with my wife about what I would do to retire, and she says you're not going to retire, just don't die at liturgy. I've had some friends die at liturgy. It's very disturbing for everyone. But if there are retired priests who are bored, find a college, find a university, volunteer to be a civilian chaplain for a National Guard unit or a local military base.
What do you think is
Because
so particularly like enriching about that? What do you think that does?
so well, first of all, there are populations that need to be ministered to who need to hear the gospel, who need the sacraments of the church. But and I'm 64 years old. I am clearly not 50 years old anymore. And what I've discovered, especially in the last 18 months, but 6 months especially, people respond to me like I'm their grandfather. And if they don't respond to me like I'm their grandfather, they respond to me like I'm their kid's grandfather. And people are just so much gentler around me. 10, 15 years ago, when I walked faster, I still speak extraordinarily quickly, but I used to speak quicker. When my hair was bright red, my beard was bright red, you know, just didn't get the same response. Now I am clearly an old guy.
What are the perks of age, huh?
It is, but it's comforting for people. I'm just and it comes with a certain sense of invisibility, which is a little hurtful. I must confess. Um,
Well, don't
but
worry. Now you're on a podcast, so we got that taken care of.
yeah, now I'm on a podcast. But I think especially for retired priests and retired and their wives, here's an opportunity not to be spiritual father and mother, but to be spiritual grandparents. And my wife and I, it wasn't for God. God willed that we not have children, But I grew up with my grandparents and my great grandparents, and it's a very different relationship.
I
I don't know.
remember we were saying something about that, but what do you think the difference is between being maybe a spiritual father and a spiritual grandfather? What's that distinction like?
What's the difference between your relationship with your dad and your relationship with your grandfather?
No, my grandfather used to just pretty much let me do whatever I want and just told me I'm the best. So it's like, that's
Yeah,
that's
pretty
like the
much.
kind of
But you know what? He does. But if you do something stupid, he's going to let you know in the gentlest possible terms.
yeah.
And frankly, I don't know about you, but I would rather disappoint my father, God rest his soul, than my grandfather, God rest his soul.
I'm with you. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, because pretty much at this age, I ain't looking for anything from anybody,
Yeah.
and I'm not, I don't, my career's winding down, my life is winding down, I
That's
just have
something
time.
that's something interesting. Do you think there's something about the psychological approval orientation of younger people as opposed to older people that, determines what they're going to be like in the church or how long they'll stick around?
Yeah, I think I'm reading now a book of meditations by the priest who was my confessor when I was in college, and Catholic priest, Cistercian monk, and I realized that I'm the same age now as he was when I fell in love with him as my spiritual father at 19 or 20.
How's that feel?
It feels great. It's just I just know stuff, you know, and the stuff that might, because I'm probably 15 or 20 years older than your dad or thereabouts.
He's about 50. So yeah,
Okay, well,
something
I've
yeah.
got him by about 15 years. So stuff that bothers him doesn't bother me anymore.
Right.
And that's not to speak ill of your father. I mean,
But it's freeing. It's something that
it's freeing.
yeah.
I don't care. Someone comes to me and says, I'm gay. Oh, okay. Do you think I'm going to hell? I'm not sure I'm not. So, and they'll look at it, really? Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to heaven. I'm hoping. I'm hoping. But I think,
You can come along for the ride for the higher percentage chance if you want to.
yeah, I mean, come along. It just, I think when you reach a certain age, you come to a certain peace with your own limitations, it becomes easier to not just tolerate, but but really sympathize with people with their weaknesses. One of the hardest parts about hearing confessions, especially for a young priest, is knowing what sins he has to tolerate. And when this was it for me, when I noticed a sin that someone hadn't confessed, you know, trying to figure out how I was supposed to respond. And now I realize, hey, they didn't tell me. I'm just going to let that one pass
Yeah. Yeah,
because
that's the way to
they're
roll with it.
well, it is, but they so I think when you get older, you just stop caring about stuff
Yeah. And from the
in
wisdom
a
of the
good way.
elderly, when I learned the term "not my monkeys, not my circus," that
Yep.
that was helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah. So I think especially I mean, and I also think though for retired priests when you're working with 18, 19, 20-year olds who are struggling with their own sense of identity, but also their relationship trying to establish themselves relative to their parents. It's nice to have someone to talk to who's been on both sides of that question.
I got a specific for you that I've
Yeah,
noticed quite a bit, and
yeah,
I mean I dealt with this myself when I was younger, but you got people who are either cradles. You see it a lot more in converts. I don't, I'm making one of those unevidential assertions that you don't
yeah,
like, but um, the idea of or the archetype of somebody that comes into the Orthodox Church, they got their theology homework done. They've read all of the Godivades fathers and the modern Athonite saints, and all those things. And I mean, I wish I was kidding, but this is like kind of how it manifests. And it was probably me too at some point, where you got these people, and then they deal with like this neuroticism and this despair over their own sinfulness.
Yeah.
Um, how do you deal with it? What do you do with that?
Oh, it's okay. Just relax. That's what I say. It
Yeah.
just, what I tell people is like, look, here's what happens in confession. You come, you accuse yourself, you talk about the things that you're ashamed of, you talk about the things that are where you're certain you've absolutely just absolutely denied and turned away from Christ. And my job is to point out, you know what? In that deepest, darkest, hellish part of your soul, there's Jesus waiting to see you. He's waiting to embrace you. There isn't any sin I commit where he's absent. He descends into hell and he preaches the gospel. And I've been doing this long enough to know that it isn't just the underworld he went to. He went to the darkest part of my heart and he's waiting there for me.
I feel like we don't focal point that enough. Like
No,
you remember when you were telling me in the last episode how we just need to maybe admit to people that Jesus loves you and we need to
yeah,
vocalize that more.
yeah.
That's kind of my crusade. Just
Good for the priest I was telling you about, whose book I'm reading. One time told me while I was still, you know, nowhere near getting married. He said, "All right, here's what's going to happen. Someday your wife is going to ask you, 'Do you love me?' The answer is not, 'Of course.' The answer is not, 'I just told you.' Because she doesn't care whether you're going to love her tomorrow or if you loved her a minute ago. She wants to know if you love her right this second. So when your wife asks you, 'Do you love me?' the answer is, 'Yes, I love you.' That's what people need to know, that right this minute, no matter how good or how bad, no matter how awful or how wonderful their life is, Jesus loves them, and he only thing he wants from them is them. He doesn't want my degrees, he doesn't want my articles, he doesn't want my lectures, he doesn't want my sermons, he doesn't want my liturgies, he doesn't want my prayers. He just wants me. And everybody knows that, but nobody says it. And I'm an old guy now. Yay.
oh, you got a lot of life in you. Trust me, you're fine.
Oh no, God willing, I got about 30 years. But the point is, I am over the embarrassment. I honestly love every second I talk with you.
Thanks, bestie.
You're welcome. Don't get too full of yourself. I love every second I talk with everybody. I think it's, well, all right, almost
Ah,
everybody. I
dang
got a
it.
couple, but the point is, but this is what Jesus wants from us. He wants us.
You
There's
know,
yeah.
I'm sorry, and the reason I kind of brought this up is because the person that, and I'm sorry to make it heavy, but the person that referred me to you was telling me that a portion of your studies, or the studies that at least you looked at, indicated that there was some correlation between people that leave the church, and then there was a certain percentage that ended up ending their own lives in some kind of element of that.
Oh, I'm not too sure, but I don't know if I've said that.
Maybe not you, but maybe it got muddled in
Yeah.
about like with some of the research. But I heard something like that, and I heard it was like a non-insignificant percentage of people that end up leaving the church like attach themselves to that, and I correlated it with this.
They commit suicide or
Yeah, yeah, and
yeah.
and
God
and and what
forbid.
what I was thinking is that, I see so many young people come into the Orthodox Church that are dealing with this thing, catechumens, newly
Yeah,
baptized, 5 years into the faith, that deal with that this thing, this very, what I want to say, specific demon that plagues them over, you're unsavable.
yeah,
Your sins are monstrous compared to the forgiveness of God and compared to your peers. It's
yeah,
like, who knows what that leads to? That
yeah,
terrifies me to think about with people.
yeah. Well, I've done a lot of stupid things. Um, yeah, actually, it's one of the reasons, and I'm maybe we can pick it up another time, but I'm going to have to scoot here because I got
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
call coming. But what I would say is this is one of the reasons I think it's really important to kind of slow down bringing people into the church and really take almost a therapeutic psychotherapeutic stance with them because if they've tasted the riches that they're only going to find in the Orthodox Church, not that they're got won't taste bits and pieces here and there, but they're going to find it in a way that's not it's not whole. Metropolitan Maximus of blessed memory, remember Father Greg, it's kata holos, not universal, but full, whole. When you've tasted the gospel in its wholeness, its Catholicity, and then you lose that, what do you have?
I think the only thing I would want to tell people is just stick with it. You're gonna be
Yeah,
okay. Chill out. Chill
it
out, man.
it's like undergraduates who fall into promiscuity. At first, it's very exciting to go from one partner to another until the moment they wake up and realize that by the time they're 20, they've been divorced 5 or 6 times.
It does something to people.
They lose the ability to trust. And you see, this is this. I tell this the undergraduates the problem with fornication: right thing, right person, right thing, wrong time. To commit before you're able to be faithful to the commitment is a very serious matter.
And who knows what other elements of your life that inability to pair bond with people affects things.
Well, it actually there's good research on that too, but the thing is, we're asking people to make an extraordinary commitment that is very costly under the best of circumstances. And honestly, whatever the retention rates are, the defection rates are, I'm surprised they're not higher.
By the grace of God, they are not.
Yeah,
By
well, I
God's
don't.
grace.
By God's grace, they are what they are. But again, from my point of view, the answer is always the same. I look at the numbers and I say, what do I have to change about me?
Yeah, if you want to change the world, change yourself first. It's
Yep,
it's a very orthodox monastic ideal.
yep, and Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah, well, yeah. Father,
All right.
thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming on and talking to us
absolutely, young
again.
man. All right,
You want to end us off with a prayer real quick, and
sure.
then we'll.
Name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord and Master of my life, take me the spirit of laziness, lust for power, and idle chatter, but give to me your servant the spirit of purity, humility, patience, and love. Yes, Lord and King, grant me to see my own sins and not to judge my brother or sister. For blessed art thou unto the ages of ages. Amen.
Amen. Father, thank you so much for coming on. You got to bounce.
I got to bounce, man.
All right, it was a pleasure talking to you. Listen, we're gonna talk soon about the other stuff we were talking about.
All righty. All
Here, all
right.
right. God
Thank you for,
bless you. Give
God
everybody my
bless you.
love. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for keeping me young. Bye bye.
Bye. And for everybody else watching, we got a couple of announcements. If you want to contribute to Father Gregory's parish, there's going to be a link down below to where you can donate to them, explore his mission, check out some of their stuff. I'm going to try to get those studies for you guys on like retention rates and stuff like that if you want to look at them. If I don't get them by the time the video comes out, there maybe by that point there will be more stuff. Orthodox Studies Institute and Matthew Namey do good stuff with that. He's a dear friend of the program and one of our partners. If you want to donate to the Orthochat, check out the Venmo and Cash App links down below in the description. We could use all the help we can get. We need the money for our projects, and we deeply appreciate everybody that's donated thus far. Okay, wait, let me do the other one first. If you want to contribute to the Orthochat and get something out of it, please check out our link to Lore Coffee Roasters down in the link below. You can contribute 10% of your purchase towards our projects by using the link below and buying some coffee from them. It's great coffee, and I love coffee. If you want to check it out, there is a link down below for the Scriptorium Press website. Great theological and patristics works by the Saints of the Orthodox Church. That if you use code OrthoChat when you purchase through their website, you will receive 15% off your order, and 10% of it will go to us. Episode 1 of the OrthoChat Temple Tours is out now. Episode 2 will be out soon. Episode 1 of the Orthochat Passport will be released soon. We're literally just finishing it up. I know I've been saying this forever. It's coming out, I promise. If you want to check out the book on Saint Sebastian Dabovich by the Debellion Press, Beacon from the Bay, that will be in the link below, the Amazon link. If you want to check out our Twitter, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, we are doing readings on the life of St. Paisios of Mount Athos by Hieromonk Isaac. It's an easy book to find. Just look on Amazon for St. Paisios. It's the big green one. But we're going to be doing readings of it on our X channel, Twitter. You want to check that out. It's below in the description. What else can I talk about? Oh, our merch store, Stratiatis, will be releasing soon. All of that stuff is currently getting organized, and the website's being built, so we'll get to that. There's other projects I can't even tell you guys about because they're kind of like top secret, but you guys are going to love them. Besides that, brothers and sisters, may our Lord Jesus Christ, His All-Holy Mother, and all the saints be with you all the days of your lives. And the one thing I forgot to mention is that we're opening up an RSS feed, so our podcast will be on all platforms very soon, and by the time this podcast comes out, it might actually be done already. So if this episode releases by the time we're done with that, you can check it out in the description below. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, wherever you like to listen on. But keep watching on the YouTube channel. We love it when you guys do it. So, God bless you all. I love you all. Stick with the program. Don't get upset at your own sinfulness. You got this, I promise. And our channels are always open. You can find my email, DM me on Twitter, if you ever need somebody to talk to. If you're struggling with your faith, if you're struggling with life in general, if I don't know what to do, I know a priest who does. So we're all in this together. God bless you all, and we'll talk to you all later.
Kyrie Iisus Χριστέ ελέησον με, 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 Kyrie Iisus Χριστέ ελέησον με.